Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to address several questions around product managers. I got asked those questions quite often, so I decided to make a video so that I can answer all the questions in this video. So firstly, about like the different forms of product managers, or kind of like in job postings, you saw different variants of product managers. What do they mean? So for example, like you see roles called product marketing, you see roles like inbound product manager, outbound product manager, customer proposition manager, technical product manager, data product manager. So in general, these roles are all product manager roles. However, the focus of those roles are different. So for example, a product marketing product manager might be focusing more around like market research, look at competitors' products, look at their customer base to try to figure out what features they need to add. A data product manager might be focusing on like using data analytics to figure out what feature needs to be added to the product, and then at the same time they also develop product features that help them to capture more data. And outbound product manager may also have some responsibilities of customer support or client service. Inbound product manager and technical product manager, they might be similar. Those roles will focus more on the like product design, product development, and the technical part of the product management lifecycle. So all those roles that I just talked about, they can be all in one role depending on the size of the company. If the company is relatively small, one product manager could be doing all that I just mentioned about, plus could be also doing UI, GUI design and user experience design. And also it depends on the type of the business. So for example, retail business and the 2B business can be quite different. Now coming to the second question, what does a product manager do and why they are always very busy? So I think it's related to the first question, but I will take an example of an all-in-one product manager to show how much a product manager needs to do. So externally, the product manager, for example, like have to look at the overall market strategy, like kind of go-to-market strategy, and look at competitor and look into competitors' products. And then they also need to, for example, like if there's opportunity, they need to talk to the customers. I will cover human-centered design in the future, but like there are different techniques that you can figure out the requirements from the customers. You may need to conduct workshop or do surveys. So there's a lot to do around that market research, customer research part. So that's external. And then internally, you have to define your product roadmap, product strategy, which needs to be aligned to the company strategy, or even sometimes your product, or not sometimes, or most time, your product release needs to align with the commercial offering of the company. So everything needs to go hand in hand. So you can see that internally on the high level, you need to get your roadmap ready and then get all the high level lined up for your product release, or maybe just product feature release. And on the working level, you need to figure out how you can break down the roadmap so that the roadmap can become deliverable. So you will have different product features. Let's say they're in the form of user stories and then they roll up into Apex. So you have those user stories in your product backlog. So you need to prioritize the user stories that will help you to achieve certain goal by certain time. And once these items are prioritized, you need to work on. So like if you're the only one in the team, then you have to also work on like enriching those user stories. A good user story will tell the agile team the feature they need to do, or the feature they need to build, and how to build the feature. but it also depends on the team. Like, I think like when the team is set up, there should be an agreement how detailed a user story should be. So like in my case, because our developers are they're not very experienced, so our user stories are very detailed about like every step they need to take to build the feature. Sometimes it even includes pseudocode. But if your developers are very experienced and could also be the domain expert, and then I think the user stories doesn't need to be very detailed. You can just say that, oh, the new feature will provide the user the opportunity to pay in this to check out in this page, something like that. And then the very experienced developers, they can figure out how they want to build it themselves. But if the development team is inexperienced, then the product manager needs to spoon feed them with a lot of details. It could also involve you a GUI mockup. So the user story could have a GUI mockup too, and sometimes the GUI mockup needs to also provide details like what's a margin and what color code the developer need to use and so on. So that's all like should be agreed under the team depending on the experience, the skill sets of the team. And then the user story also need to contain exit criteria, which tells the developer the final goal they need to achieve, and also tells the testers what they need to test to make sure this feature can become shippable. One thing to note is earlier I mentioned that the user story needs to be prioritized first, and then the product manager starts to enrich it, right? So there are other ways to do it. So for example, like some companies, they could enrich the user stories first and then go through that prioritization. So it really depends on your company situation, what kind of people you have, how much resource you have. For me, I think it makes more sense that it's prioritized first, then the product manager start working on it. Especially as I mentioned in my case, because the developers are relatively inexperienced, so there's a lot of work for the product manager to do to enrich it. That's why I prefer to prioritize it first, and then the product manager can start working on it. It goes back to actually maybe a loophole in the agile concept, or it's just missed out, is like how this kind of analysis and the design phase or design time can fit into the 2 week sprint, because sometimes it takes much longer to get the requirements ready. So I can talk about how my team does it. We do kind of a rotation to sort out this problem, and when we do the 2 week sprint, it's more about the design. It's more about the development and testing time. But for analysis and design, we don't consider it then in the 2 week sprint. We do it kind of outside of the sprint cycle. Once the user story is completed, the product manager can walk through the requirements with the dev team and the testing team, so that firstly, the team needs to understand the requirements. Secondly, they need to provide the effort estimation. Once that's done, then basically the user story is ready for sprint planning meeting. So during the sprint planning meeting, we look at the user stories that are done. That means like have all the details and already got the effort estimation. Then we make a decision, see whether they can fit into a sprint, then make a decision. Say, okay, like for the sprint, we're going to deliver those user stories. And then when the developers and testers are working on those user stories, they will always seek product managers' advice on for clarification. And then for the testers, when they design the test cases or when they write the test cases, they will also check with the product managers to make sure all the scenarios are covered. When the features are developed for the first time, we mainly use functional testing, which is manual testing. So automation testing come more, at least for us, we use it more for regression purpose. So after the developers finish developing the product and the testers finishing testing the product manager may need to do a final round of testing to make sure everything is in place. And then the product manager also needs to write release notes. But it depends on, like, sometimes certain sprint doesn't result in a release, then they don't need to do that. But if the sprint results in an external release, then they need to draft the release note and then send it out through certain channel or get it approved by the leadership team and send it out. Slightly before or after the product or feature release, the product manager usually also needs to conduct training either internally or externally or both. So internally to train the support staff or the front office support staff or the frontline, and externally maybe train the users, train the customers directly. Sometimes a product manager also needs to help with the debugging process because they know the product probably better than anyone else. And sometimes some product managers, especially for 2B business, they also involve in like pitching the product to the customer, or maybe like they need to convince the potential customer of their product roadmap. In some companies with multiple products or like giant products with multiple modules, the product managers might be in charge of the P&L too. But that's an organizational decision. So, like they could be in charge of the P&Ls, and they have a say in terms of like how many sales people they can hire, how much resource they can allocate to promote their own products, because they all come out from their P&L. These are the common tasks that a product manager may be asked to do. It really depends on like what type of product manager role it is. Is it an inbound one, or is it a product marketing one, or data product manager, or more of a like inbound technical type of product manager?